If you're new to Slay the Spire or to the Ironclad, then this guide is a great place for you to start with the top 10 Ironclad tips and tricks, starting with a strong reminder that every rule in Slay the Spire has a card, synergy, or an instance that begs you to break it for an even better run. This list is not exhaustive by any means, and I invite you to look for at least one rule to break every run, because each run is different and your decks are always going to change. The Ironclad needs energy to make use of a lot of its game-winning cards. With most of the best Ironclad cards costing 2 or more, it's crucial to find some way to gain that extra energy. Prioritize boss energy relics or cards that give you burst energy when you need it. Coffee Dripper is insanely good with Ironclad, and it basically gives you free energy. It feeds into some other tips and tricks in this guide as well. Don't even worry about the fact that you can't heal at rest sites, because Ironclad has incredible sustain. You can even use the Burning Blood starting relic to restore 6 health after every enemy fight. That alone means for every 4 enemy encounters, you heal the Ironclad as much as you would at a campfire. Ironclad also has several cards that will provide healing for every fight. Reaper scales really well with more enemies and with more strength by healing for a total of unblocked damage dealt, and don't forget that Feed also heals you, even though the card only says raise max hit points. The Ironclad also has a Magic Flower relic available, which boosts the amount of health restored in combat. Couple that with all of these relics and you should have no problem keeping your health high enough to prioritize upgrades. At your campfires, upgrades take a lot of Ironclad's cards from mediocre to great, either by reducing mana costs, dealing more damage, blocking higher, or giving you better buffs. Reducing energy costs helps with Ironclad's energy-hungry cards, dealing more damage and blocking harder further helps you with your health sustain, and dealing an extra turn or two of vulnerability and weak grants you more chances to be more aggressive. Ironclad has the potential to deal a lot of damage with several cards. If you make aggressive choices to fight more elites, you get more relics, you have a higher chance of getting better cards, and you get more gold to get more goodies later on. Just do like our cultist friend and say caw-caw down in the comments section. Subscribe for more and charge forward to hit harder every turn. Remember, with all your sustain, you can use your health as an expendable resource to avoid taking further damage for a turn or two down the line. Many cards you won't need to use over and over in a single fight, and with most hallways you aren't necessarily going to be needing to shuffle your deck a bunch of times anyways, so go ahead and play Fiendfire to maximize your exhaust. When you're new to Slay the Spire, exhausting cards can be pretty intimidating. Losing cards until the end of combat can seem daunting, because you never quite know when you need to use a card later on instead of dumping it out of your deck to be useless in the next fight. On the other hand though, if you start to see your regular hallway fights as only lasting long enough to see all your cards once or twice, the thought of getting rid of them doesn't end up looking all that bad. Plus, with Corruption, you can cycle out cards that you don't need to hopefully draw the ones that you will need right now. Couple that to Feel No Pain and maybe even a Dead Branch, and the Exhaust Synergy becomes one of the strongest and most reliable deck archetypes you can build not only as the Ironclad, but in the entire game. Finally, with Dark Embrace in an Exhaust deck, you can maximize your synergies. Synergy in a game like this is when you have one or more cards, relics, or potions that have an interaction together that wouldn't normally activate. Ironclads suffer when they're played alone, but if you can build decks that build on themselves, you'll be able to scale more, hit harder, defeat enemies faster, and overall win more often. Many of the best Ironclad cards do nothing until you have some cards that can synergize with them, and those end up being the keystones to the most awesome decks. However, make sure that you don't get trapped. Early on in many runs, you'll be presented with some excellent cards that have great synergies. But if you take some of them too early, or before you can make any synergies happen, then these cards will be little use to you and essentially dead draws because you won't be able to play them, and if you do, it's a wasted turn that causes you to lose health and won't let you deal damage. Make sure instead to build towards your elite and boss fights in front of you now so that later you can take the amazing cards and make a good deck better. Sometimes you'll take a card that's great for the Act 1 elites and find out later on it's not in line with the deck you're building, so you'll need to remove useless cards. Whether you're getting rid of starting cards like Strike, tossing away cards that were great early on but aren't so useful in Act 2 or 3, or just thinning away some extra fat to close in on an infinite, if you're not removing cards from your deck, you likely won't be winning very often. Large decks have their place, but always remember, if you have 45 cards, it might take you up to 7 turns to get the card you need to start whatever engine you're building in the deck. It's great to have Strength, Dexterity, Exhaust, Healing, Curse, and Wound Manipulation, Draw, and Energy Boost, but if the cards don't synergize with others, they are essentially dead draws, which is why you need to choose the right cards. Almost every power card has a high seat in one deck or another, but most Ironclad decks don't need all of them. Even if you can have multiple synergies going in one deck, do you really need to? Pick one or two of your most viable paths to build this deck and leave everything else behind. Remember, you don't have to take a card each time it's offered to you, and often it's the best choice to not take a card, which leads me to a bonus tip and trick number 11, don't take Clash. If you want to see an example of ways you can break all the rules and still win, I recommend you watch this video here, and YouTube thinks this one would be great for you until I drop another tips and tricks video. Until then, so long and I'll see you soon.